change in the wage, what happens if the what happens to the short run demand for labor if the wage increases or decreases? The firm's labor demand curve usually downward sloping because of the law of diminishing marginal returns. Chapter 6. The marginal product from extra workers, capital M, capital P, subscript capital L, of a firm with fixed capital eventually falls as the firm increases the amount of labor it uses, because the marginal product of labor declines as more workers are hired. The marginal revenue product of labor, which equals a constant price times the marginal product of labor, or the demand curve, must slope downward as well. According to equation 15.3, the firm hires labor until the value of its marginal product of labor equals the wage. Price times the marginal product of labor equals wage. If wage increases and price remains constant, the only way for the firm to maintain this equality is to adjust its labor force so as to cause its marginal product of labor to rise. If the firm operates where the production function exhibits diminishing marginal returns to labor, its marginal product of labor rises when it reduces its labor force. Thus, the firm's demand curve for labor is downward sloping. We can confirm this reasoning using a formal comparative statics analysis. Because equation 15.3 is an identity, it must hold for all values of W wage. Hence, we can write the amount of labor demanded as an implicit function of the wage. Capital L of W, labor as a function of wage. To show how labor demand varies with the wage, we differentiate equation 15.3 with respect to W wage. So price multiplied by the derivative of the marginal product of labor with respect to labor multiplied by the derivative of labor with respect to wage equals 1. Rearranging terms, the derivative of labor with respect to wage equals 1 over the price multiplied by the derivative of the marginal product of labor with respect to labor. Equation 15.6. Thus, if the firm is operating where the production function exhibits diminishing marginal product of labor, the derivative of marginal product of labor with respect to labor equals the second derivative of quantity with respect to labor is less than 0, and the derivative of labor with respect to wage is less than 0, and the demand curve for labor slopes downward. Figure 15.1 shows that the thread mill's short-run labor demand curve is downward sloping. The quantity of labor services demanded rises from 32 to 88 workers if the wage falls from $15 to $10. The reason the firm's demand curve is downward sloping is that its marginal product of labor, capital M, capital P, subscript capital L, equals 1.2 times labor to the power of negative 0.4, falls as the firm uses more labor. The derivative of the marginal product of labor with respect to labor equals negative 0.48 labor to the power of negative 1.4 is less than 0. Indeed, because this inequality holds for any capital L labor, the production function exhibits diminishing marginal product of labor at any quantity of labor, and hence the mill's labor demand curve slopes downward everywhere.